the deficiency is on the cyber resiliency side of the fence.
It is. Yeah, every time. And that's the biggest thing that people are having problems with. But what they don't think about is what happens if they get in.
Yes, they're already inside, creating havoc in the process.
Tech News Today. Tech News Today.
Hello and welcome to Tech News Today, or TNT. My name is Keith Parks. Today we'll discuss the latest tech news and the business value technology can provide. The podcast is for both technical and business executives that want to understand technology updates and what the impacts can be on their business. In today's session, we're going to dive into the difference between cybersecurity and cyber resiliency. Recently I was in a meeting with the CEO of a Fortune 1000 global company, and we're discussing the business downsides of a data breach to a publicly traded company. Among the data points discussed was the cost of the breach, impact to the business reputation, legal ramifications, future costs, and of course, the personal value of losing your job. He's a brilliant businessman, but not that experienced when it comes to technology. So I gave him an analogy to explain the difference between cybersecurity and cyber resiliency. Cybersecurity is like a castle that is well defended against the enemy. Big walls, an army of well-trained defenders there to repel the bad actors. Whereas cyber resiliency is what happens if the bad actors get behind your castle's defenses. How do you identify and stop the infiltration and recover from the damage they caused? Unfortunately, in his case, there was a data breach that went undiscovered for at least a couple of months. The IT team had built a strong defense for the business. However, when it came time to get rid of the bad actors, due to a lack of a cyber resiliency plan, the IT team played whack-a-mole, trying to stop and recover from the breach. So in today's session, we're going to focus on cybersecurity and cyber resiliency strategies. We also have a special guest today, Rick Halverson. Rick is a subject matter expert with IBM and has engaged with hundreds of clients utilizing ITIL and other best practices to analyze their security and cyber resiliency approaches. All right, everybody. Hey, thank you for joining us today as a continuation of our security podcast model we have in place. Today, we have a very special guest, Rick Halverson with IBM. He's actually North American Principal Flash Systems Specialist. He's going to walk through some of the latest challenges that he's seen from customers when it comes to data security, and hopefully provide some interesting answers and ideas along the way that gives you some ideas of what to do in your own environment. Rick, how you doing today?
Doing great, Keith. How are you, sir?
I'm loving life. It's Fridays are always good to do recordings on. So, hey, Rick, real simple. I just got a couple of questions for you, and I kind of walk you through, what's going on now and some thoughts about the future, if you don't mind. Maybe I'll just start with an easy one. Working with customers, what are the biggest data security challenges that you're talking to them about on a daily basis?
That's a good question, Keith. I think one of the biggest things that people are issues, I guess, that people are don't even know that they have is the fact that they know they have cybersecurity issues. They know they need to keep the bad guys out because the bad guys are just so good, right? But what they don't think about is what happens if they get in. And the answer for most organizations is, hey, we have a backup plan. We have a disaster recovery plan that includes backup. The problem, Keith, is that the bad guys right now, they are encrypting the backup copies first. And if they encrypt that first, and then they come back and hit your primary data, what do you recover from? And if you ever turn on the news at 6 o'clock and you just are enamored at how many big companies are paying the ransom, why are they doing it? And the answer is more than likely the data that they would have used to recover from has been encrypted first. Then they say, hey, we're going to encrypt all your primary data if you don't pay us the ransom. It's probably less expensive to pay a $10 million ransom than it is to try to buy all brand new stuff and make everything work, and all the time incurred with that. And of course, what is the business implications if you had to do that? So I think that's probably the biggest thing.
Interesting. So it sounds like you see a lot of customers, especially big enterprise clients, they spend an awful lot of money building the wall and building the firewall and the moat, but they're not looking at what happens to people after they get in. Is that kind of the idea?
That's exactly right. If you think about the catapult back in the days, They put up a wall and they used a catapult, and the catapult still got stuff over the walls, right? That's kind of where
Right.
we are with the bad guys right now, unfortunately, man.
Yes. Yes. They're already inside having creating havoc in the process. I got it. Okay. Hey, so along those lines, what data security mistakes do you commonly see, or some of the big ones that are going on out there from an end user standpoint?
Well, aside from not understanding the difference between cybersecurity and cyber resiliency, and let me just explain what that is. Cybersecurity is what everybody does to keep the bad guys out, but cyber resiliency is that moment when you get hit, and now the organization has to realize, gee whiz, how fast can we recover, assuming we have a clean copy, right? And that time frame can be anywhere from literally the data that will make the company just limp. That could be as short a time frame as 4 to 6 hours, but to get all data back on average worldwide is 23 days. So
Wow.
that's one. Yeah, and another one is so simple, and that is encryption. Why don't you just encrypt every piece of data you have? And we all say, well, gee whiz, why don't we, right? And the real reason for that is the implication of encryption is a lack of or a lessening of performance. So
Right.
many of the world's biggest organizations, believe it or not, Keith, they want to encrypt. They literally they have to. They feel they have to, but because the workloads are so heavy and they can't take that performance hit, they don't encrypt. So one of the biggest things people can do is to understand what is resiliency, and also how can I use encryption without any performance penalty.
Okay. So in a nutshell, cyber security, obviously, once again, building the walls, the moat, the alligators, et cetera, but the deficiency is on the cyber resiliency side of the fence.
It is. Yeah, every time. And that's the biggest thing that people are having problems with. Almost every organization out there, and I tell the story a lot, but I know a one-man dry cleaner that got hit. So if you think it only happens to the big guys, it happens to everybody. I know it's crazy, right? But
Right, right.
the reasoning is you have to understand that it isn't, they don't care. They don't care how big your company is. They literally just want to encrypt your data, ask for money, get the money, leave, and go somewhere else. That's all they care about, because going to big companies, they have to spend a lot more work to go to infiltrate through all the different security based postures and the measures that they have in place. With little companies, they typically don't have that. And because of that, it's so much simpler to go to littler companies. Maybe the payout isn't as big, but at the end of the day, they might, in the same time frame, make more money from hitting a whole bunch of small and medium businesses than they possibly could after they waste 6 months going into the bigger organizations.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Makes sense. Hey, I guess along those lines, next question for you. Um, Based on the client engagement, what are your top recommendations? It sounds like it's time to go into the cyber resilience side of the fence too. Obviously, make sure your walls and moats and alligators are set up correctly, but it sounds like the cyber resiliency is the big gap.
It truly is. And, cyber resilience is a big topic right now, especially by the people performing backup. So IBM came out with a technology, and I don't mean to toot IBM's horn here, but we came out with a technology in the mainframe arena, because mainframes around the world are typically housed the biggest, most important data on earth: financial data, Wall Street data, federal data, that sort of stuff. And
Okay.
so they use mainframes. And so IBM came out with the ability. Now, companies have a capability called snapshots. And a snapshot is nothing more than a point in time. Just like if you take a picture with a camera, it's a point in time copy. If anything bad should ever happen, they know that they can revert back to that snapshot, and boom, we can recover from that. The problem is how much time elapsed between when you made that last snapshot. You may
Right.
lose
Right.
that data. And we all know that from having a Windows computer, right? But so we developed this technology where you can use the same snapshot, but put it in a what's called an immutable state. And immutability simply means that we make that point in time copy, and we make it so that it can never be written to, altered, or deleted without a bunch of different processes. And the customer can determine which processes they want. But it's things like two-person integrity, multi-factor authentication, and so forth. But the beauty of immutable snapshots are, because they can't be written to, altered, or deleted, the bad guys when they go into the system, when they infiltrate, they cannot write an encryption code to that data because, again, it is incapable of being written to. There used to be an old world term, started out literally so many years ago, called worm. And worm meant write once, read many. And that's what this immutable snapshot is all about. And here's the beauty of it. I said that they can't write to it, but they also can't write to it because they cannot see immutable copies.
Okay.
So it's just a beautiful thing. So immutable copies give customers that I think first an organization wants to do encryption, but I think secondly, you want to make all your data and put it in an immutable state, whether it's on primary storage or on secondary storage. So that's what a resiliency is all about. If you can recover, so let's talk about recover, right?
Okay.
You said, let's talk about what true resiliency is. There's two sides of resiliency. One is on-site, and the other side is secondary data, off-site data on the cloud, or whatever you want to call it. On-site, imagine if you could make immutable copies, and instead of sending those copies to the cloud or your secondary site, what if you could put those copies on the primary arrays? That would mean that when you wanted to recover, your copies would now come off a device which works, assuming they're using flash, they're gonna have a microsecond response time to the start of bringing these copies back so the company can start recovery. And the secondary one is we want to do that same immutability at the secondary site so that the bad guys, they're aiming for the secondary site. If we can put everything in the secondary site in an immutable state, then they can't go to that and encrypt it first. That's what resiliency is about.
All right. So, you got a little technical there, but just to regurgitate what you kind of said from a business perspective, bottom line is you're saying, hey, if someone can get in and your data is encrypted or protected, or, you've got this firewall built in place where they can't touch it, basically the business can get back up and running in hours, minutes versus days, weeks, months. Is that the idea?
That's exactly right. Yep. And I would stick away from the word firewall probably only because it isn't a true firewall. So we don't want to.
I got technical again. Sorry about that.
Yeah, interchange technologies, but that is exactly right. If I can, and here's an interesting thing too, Keith, and a lot of people, including myself, till just a couple of years ago, there's a term out there called minimum viable company. And are you familiar with what that means?
No, I'm not. Nope.
Yeah, most people aren't. So what a minimum viable company is it's what data, what processes, what applications does an organization need to use to be up and running in what you call a minimum viable company. Now, that might mean, hey, I need this application and this application. But interestingly enough, we worked with an organization that set up a minimum viable company, but they forgot one thing. And believe it or not, the day they got hit, the minimum viable company started coming on together. They were running okay, limping, but okay. The very next day, there was nothing going on. And you might say, well, why? Everything was working the day before. They forgot to include in their minimum viable company the ability for users to log on. So customers couldn't log on, employees couldn't log on, and all of a sudden, no business could be done. So guess what? That means that the business is having some major issues and possibly loss of money. So a minimum viable company is really important. So what we recommend is to make your copies immutable, but then to take the minimum viable company data and literally put only that data that can help you run as a business, not great, but run, and put that minimum viable company data on the primary array. And when we can do that, because it's coming off the primary array, once the organization gets hit, they can be up and running, as you said, seconds, minutes, at the worst, in hours. And again, they'll be limping a little bit, but it will be fairly transparent, not only to people on the inside, employees, but to the people on the outside. And the last thing organizations want is a major catastrophe to happen where everybody inside and outside knows, and people start communicating about it.
Yes. Your customers, your suppliers, it's all bad news.
That's right.
Rick, what you're talking about, I mean, to a layman like myself, it doesn't sound that complicated. What am I missing?
Keith, I think the real answer there is that this is all brand new to us. We didn't have the attacks like we have now. Even a year ago. even
Yeah.
2 years ago. And
Right.
attacks, believe it or not, can happen where like 2 years ago, it was something like the attacks took, a minimum of like a week and a half. And 2 years later, these attacks are happening in a day or two.
Right.
So what that means is they are attacking not only more frequently, but the time frame that incurs for the business to feel the impact is getting shorter and shorter. So organizations like IBM are trying to figure out, what do we do to circumvent this? So again, we came out with immutable copies. We have certain things, within our lineup that can look at data literally as it's being written to the media. Imagine data coming in and the media itself could detect if there was anomalies on that data. That would mean you would be determining possible anomalies in seconds. And
Hmm.
what's interesting about that, Keith, what does that mean? What's the business impact? When you can find it faster, less data gets affected. And that's what it's all about. We want the least data affected because, again, when the least data is affected, what's our recovery time? Much, much faster.
Right. Right. Almost real time at that point. That's amazing.
Fairly close. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Hey, I just got one more question for you. Great information. I hope the audience is really enjoying this. Last question. Looking out your crystal ball, going out a year, 3 years, 5 years with AI. Where do you kind of see this all going from a protection standpoint? Is it, obviously we're talking about, building the wall and keeping people out. But more importantly, it sounds like you're talking about, hey, protect your data inside, things you can do to stop them from actually accessing your data, regardless of if they get in.
Yeah. So I mean, you're right on target. We need to, or let me back up. Organizations tend to have security people or a group of security people, group of storage people, group of server people, group of network people. And I
Right.
think what's going to happen in the future, Keith, particularly with storage and security anyway, is that these two groups are probably going to have to come together.
Okay.
Maybe not all the way together, but why do you need that? Because security is about keeping the bad guys out, but where does it happen? It happens on the storage. So if the security organizations and the storage organizations can work together, then they become that real kind of shield, I guess you could say, for keeping the bad guys out. And I think that's probably where it's going. Further than that, companies like IBM and some others out there are using AI in a big way because, for instance, we have a product, and again, not trying to jump on an IBM bandwagon here, but we
Sure.
have a way of not only determining anomalies as they're hitting the media, but how do you know what an anomaly is? Well, the easiest way to figure out what anomaly is to run it through some sort of AI. And the way that we do it is we put an inference engine on the front, machine learning based. So we'll put the machine learning front end out there, and it will learn what is normal for a customer. And then as it learns that the customer has these compression ratios and they typically have this bandwidth and all the attributes of storage,
Right.
what that machine learning does, man, is it learns that, and then all of a sudden it knows what's normal and what's not.
Sure. Okay.
And that's how AI is going to feed into everything that we do in the future. And AI, believe it or not, is being fed by organizations like X-Force, for instance. X-Force is an ethical hacker organization, and they literally every second of the day are pulling data in, and they're everything they can to see how the bad guys, what they're doing, how they're doing it, and so forth. That all those ways that bad guys are doing are getting fed into AI. So AI, I believe, to answer your question properly, that AI will be absolutely, I mean, 500% more fundamental for the future because we can build the models that will help us kind of throw even more shields. No matter where they're going, we're going to have, excuse me, we're going to have a much better chance of defending them from putting malicious activity into our networks.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. So really the security and the storage teams kind of become a data protection team, right? Based on regardless of where the threat is coming from, inside or outside.
And data protection, no matter where that data is, whether it's
Right.
on site or at the secondary sites. A lot of people think data protection is protecting the data that's at your, that is at your secondary site so that you can recover from them. But
Right.
no, the data needs to be literally protected from the moment, the second that it's written, all the way through the last years of archival.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, hey, I really appreciate your time today. I know we had some connectivity issues. I love your picture. Looks like you're looking for bad guys. Look like you're like an old Western. You're squinting your eyes and everything. So I really appreciate that. Scaring the bad guys. Keep it up.
Thanks for
All right,
having me.
Mr. Rick Alverson. Thank you a lot for your time today. Really appreciate it. Everyone, if you're interested, we've got some webinars that are coming up where Rick is actually one of the guest speakers. We'll dive deeper into some of this data. We'll put the links in the chat or the links in the information in the bottom of the screen. And Rick, thanks a lot. Really appreciate your time today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Keith.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining us on this Tech News Today session. We really appreciate your time and strive to provide valuable content. If you'd like to be notified when we post new videos, please like and subscribe to this channel. We produce over 250 technology events every year, focusing on the tech value and the good and bad impacts on business. Topics include cybersecurity, AI, cloud strategy, and other current technology solution topics. So we have Cyber Resiliency webinars scheduled for the end of this month, where the focus will be on real-world use case information, how to protect your data, and how to minimize the damage to your business. If you're interested in attending, please see the link below or send me an email to kparks@innovateims.com, and we will send your invitations to our upcoming events. Thanks again for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you on a future TNT session. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Tech News Today.